I am back with author and film historian Mark Harris. He'll be with me each Tuesday night this month to discuss the films of the directors featured in his book, Five Came Back. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you. This
is one of those great Batman examples in Across the Pacific where Sidney Greenstreet had just shoot Humphrey Bogart. You're a spy, this is high stakes. I think you have permission in this case. But no, let's just hit him on the head and have him come back and sabotage your plans.
That's right, and I don't think anybody involved in this movie worried too much about posterity. You know, right. I think it would probably amaze John Huston to know that 73 years later, we're talking about this movie that was intended as a very lighthearted, disposable piece of entertainment, written in a few weeks, shot in a few more, released just to satisfy an audience that, after the start of World War II, was hungry for international spy thrillers.
We mentioned it a little bit before the movie, but we see the significant stereotyping of the Japanese character, the guy who hits Humphrey Bogart in the back of the head with the gun. As the movies went forward and these directors started to make films into the 40s, including some for the military, many were concerned about adding to that stereotype, weren't they?
Yes. In World War II movies made during World War II, there was a real difference between the way the Germans and the Japanese were depicted. The Germans were shown as being people under the thrall of an evil man, but the Japanese were depicted almost as another species. They were shown with thick glasses, with buck teeth, with scrawny builds. In the worst and most racist of these movies, they were routinely compared to monkeys and rats. And this became a point of such contention that the government actually started to exert pressure on Hollywood to knock it off. It was the government that actually urged the studios toward a more reasonable and progressive view of Japanese and Japanese Americans, because they knew that the war would end eventually and that we would be in some way reconciled with Japan, even if as conquerors.
I find really interesting that conflict, that the government that is interning Japanese is at the same time worried that Hollywood may be overly stereotyping them.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you hear that during World War II the government put pressure on Hollywood to make movies a certain way. You automatically think that must be interference or censorship, right, or meddling. But there were instances where the government was really on the right side, including, for instance, urging Hollywood to show more African Americans in their movies, just in ball games and street scenes and bars and parks, to get across the idea that Americans should get used to seeing African Americans in places where they were used to seeing only white people, because African Americans would be in jobs that needed to be filled because so many men were at war.
Mark, thanks very much. Stick around. Mark and I will be back to discuss a John Huston documentary about U.S. military operations on a remote island where Huston got his first taste of aerial combat.
Turner Classic